The wind screamed through the glacier peaks like something dying. Isolda Graythorn pulled her threadbare cloak tighter, but the cold found every gap, every weakness crawling through wool and skin straight into bone. The snow fell thick and relentless, white on endless white, until the world became nothing but frozen breath and the crunch of her boots through drifts that reached her knees. 24 winters she'd survived out here. 24 winters since her father shoved her into these woods like unwanted trash. Her fingers wrapped in strips of rabbit fur were already numb. She'd checked 3 traps so far, and all empty. Her stomach twisted with familiar hunger, that old companion that never quite left. If she caught nothing today tomorrow, she'd be too weak to check the traps at all. That's how it worked at the forest's edge, where no one came looking and no one spoke her name except to curse it. Isolda the witch, they called her in Frostvale. The silver-eyed demon, as if she'd chosen to be born with eyes that shimmered like moonlight on water. As if she'd asked for her mother to die screaming as she entered the world. As if she'd begged her father to look at her infant face and see only the ghost of his dead wife twisted into something he couldn't love. She was 10 when Aldrich Graythorn dragged her deep into Black Pine Woods, pointed toward the darkness, and told her to walk. "Don't come back," he'd said, his voice flat, empty. "You killed her. You don't deserve the warmth of decent folk. 14 years ago. Might as well have been yesterday." Isolda gritted her teeth and pushed forward. The 4th trap lay near the ravine where the ground turned treacherous, where the forest grew so dense even sunlight gave up trying to reach the frozen earth. She should turn back. The storm was worsening, the temperature dropping. But hunger makes you stupid. Hunger makes you brave. That's when she saw it. Red on white, blood. Not a few drops, not the small scattered evidence of a rabbit caught and killed. This was a river of crimson cutting through the snow, wide and fresh and still steaming in the frigid air. A trail so broad it looked like something had been dragged, or something was bleeding out as it ran. Isolda's heart kicked against her ribs. Every instinct she'd honed over 14 winters alone screamed at her to run. To sprint back to her pathetic little hut, bolt the doorstuff, rags in the cracks, and pray that whatever was bleeding wouldn't follow her scent home. But she didn't run. Her hand went to the grimoire tucked inside her cloak. The leather-bound book her mother had left behind, filled with drawings of herbs and instructions written in a careful feminine hand. Instructions Isolda had taught herself to read by candlelight, word by painful word, because that book was the only piece of Elwyn Graythorn she'd ever known. Healers don't run from blood, her mother had written on the first page. They run toward it. Isolda followed the trail. It led her deeper into Black Pine Woods, past frozen fir trees whose branches groaned under the weight of accumulated snow. The wind died here. The silence pressed in like a physical thing, broken only by her breathing and the soft crunch of her footsteps. The blood kept going, kept leading a crimson thread through a white maze. Then she heard it, a sound that froze the marrow in her bones, a deep rattling growl, not the snarl of a cornered fox or the warning rumble of a bear. This was something else, something that vibrated in her chest cavity, that made her lungs feel too small, that spoke of pain and rage, and the kind of animal strength that could tear a human body apart without effort. Isolda stopped. Her breath came fast and shallow. The small hunting knife at her belt suddenly felt laughably inadequate. She should leave. She should absolutely leave. Instead, she forced her legs to move. One step, another, around the massive trunk of an ancient pine, and there he was, the wolf. He was gigantic. Even huddled and broken in the snow, caught and bleeding, he was larger than any wolf she'd ever seen. Larger than any wolf should be. His fur was black as a moonless midnight, so dark it seemed to swallow the dim forest light. It gleamed despite being matted with blood and ice. The trap had closed around his left hind leg, one of those brutal iron things the Frostvale hunters set illegally deep in the woods. Steel jaws lined with silver coating, designed to hold even the largest predators until they died from exhaustion and blood loss. The teeth had dug deep into flesh and muscle. Isolda could see bone through the mangled tissue. The wolf's massive head swung toward her. His eyes met hers. Gold. Liquid burning gold, like honey held up to sunlight. Like molten metal. Like nothing she'd ever seen in an animal's face. Isolda should have screamed, should have run. Every survival instinct demanded what? But she didn't. Because in those impossible eyes, she saw something she recognized. Something that made her chest ache with a familiarity she couldn't name. Pain. Deep bone-grinding pain. And beneath it, sharper and more terrifying intelligence. An awareness too keen, too focused, too human for any animal that walked on 4 legs. The wolf growled again, a warning that rolled through the frozen air like thunder before a storm. His lips pulled back, exposing fangs as long as her fingers, fangs that could crush her windpipe in a single bite. "It's all right," Isolda whispered. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady, forced it calm, the way she'd learned to calm injured rabbits before she ended their suffering quickly. "I won't hurt you." That was a lie. She would hurt him. Trying to open that trap would hurt like all seven hells. She knelt slowly in the snow, every movement deliberate, controlled. The wolf watched her with those burning eyes that didn't blink, didn't look away. She could see his chest heaving, could see the tremors running through his massive body. Shock, blood loss. He was dying. Isolda stretched out one hand, so stupid, so suicidally stupid. Let it hover in the air a hand's width from his muzzle, close enough that he could snap forward and take her fingers off in an instant. "I'm going to help you," she said quietly, "but you have to let me." A long, frozen second passed. The wind had died completely. The world held its breath. Then so slowly she thought she was imagining it, the wolf lowered his head. Not in submission, in permission. Something cracked open in Isolda's chest, some wall she'd built brick by brick over 14 years of isolation. She crawled closer through the blood-stained snow. The trap was a monster of iron and cruelty. Her fingers, already numb from cold, fumbled over the mechanism. She'd seen traps like this before. The Frostvale hunters bragged about them in the tavern when they thought she wasn't listening, claimed they could hold a full-grown bear for 3 days, claimed nothing escaped once those jaws closed. The silver coating gleamed dully in the dim light. Silver. She'd read about it in her mother's grimoire. Toxic to some creatures, burned them like acid. "This is going to hurt," Isolda warned. Her breath misted in the air between them. "Forgive me." She braced her hands against the spring mechanism. Her muscles burned as she pressed with every ounce of strength her half-starved body possessed. The metal was ice-cold, biting into her palms, through the rabbit fur wrappings. The wolf howled. The sound tore through the forest like the end of the world. Pure agony given voice. It pierced Isolda's chest, brought tears to her eyes, made her want to let go and run, and never stop running. But she didn't let go. She pressed harder, harder. Her vision blurred. Her arms trembled. The trap resisted, and then click. The jaws sprang open. The wolf stumbled sideways, his injured leg buckling. Blood poured from the wound, steaming hot against the frozen ground. Too much blood. Far too much. The snow around him turned scarlet. He'd die here if she did nothing. Bleed out in the next 10 minutes while she watched. Isolda tore off her cloak, her only cloak. The one thing standing between her and freezing to death on the walk home. She wrapped it around the mangled leg, pulling the wool tight as a tourniquet. The wolf growled a low rumble of pain, but he didn't snap at her, didn't fight. Instead, his massive head sank into the blood-stained snow, exhausted, at the very edge of consciousness. "No," Isolda said sharply. "Not here, not now." She wasn't strong. Her whole life had been hunger and cold and the daily battle to survive. She weighed maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. This wolf had to weigh 450. But somehow, through pure desperation or madness or something she couldn't name, she got her arms under his massive body. She pulled, dragged. The wolf was impossibly heavy. Each step felt like her spine would snap. Her legs shook. Her vision swam with black spots at the edges. "Come on," she gasped. Her breath came in ragged sobs. "Come on, you damn beast." Step by step, she hauled him through the snow. Her lungs burned. Her muscles screamed. The path back to her hut seemed endless, an impossible journey through white hell. But she didn't give up, couldn't give up, because she'd been left to die in these woods once. She'd been dragged out here and abandoned like something broken and worthless. And she'd be damned, truly damned, before she did the same to another living thing. When she finally reached her hut, she nearly collapsed. The small structure leaned against a rock outcropping half buried in snow. Barely more than 4 walls and a roof that leaked when it rained. But it was hers. She shoved the door open with her shoulder and dragged the wolf over the threshold. The door fell shut behind them. The wind howled outside, but in here it was quiet. Only her ragged breathing and the faint, irregular rise and fall of that massive black chest. Isolda had brought a wolf into her house. The gods have mercy on fools. She'd need it. The fire in her small stone hearth had almost died. Just embers glowing sullenly in the ash. Isolda threw on her last 3 logs, dry wood she'd been saving for the worst of winter. She blew on the coals until flames leapt up, golden light spilling across the rough wooden walls, and casting flickering shadows on the massive body sprawled across her only fur bed. That bed, a bearskin she'd taken from a dead hunter 3 years back, found him frozen in the snow, his fire gone out, his body already stiff. She'd said a prayer for his soul and taken what she needed to survive. The pelt had kept her alive through winters that should have killed her. Now a dying wolf bled all over it. The wolf was still breathing, shallow and painful but breathing. She knelt beside him and carefully unwrapped her blood-soaked cloak from his leg. The wound was worse than she'd thought. The trap had torn through muscle and tendon. She could see the white gleam of bone through the dark blood. If she didn't act now, he wouldn't survive another hour. "Hold still," Isolda murmured, though she knew he probably couldn't understand. Probably couldn't hear anything past the pain. "This is going to burn like all 7 hells." She fetched her healing box from the corner. It wasn't much. Everything she owned fit in a wooden crate no bigger than a bread basket. Dried mugwort against infection, willow bark for pain, spider webs to stop bleeding, yarrow powder, comfrey root, all the herbs her mother's grimoire had taught her to gather and preserve. Elowen had been Frostvale's healer before she died. Isolda had never met her, but she'd memorized every word in that grimoire, studied the diagrams, practiced the techniques on injured rabbits and birds until her hands knew the movements like prayer. She warmed water over the fire until it steamed, then began cleaning the wound. The wolf twitched under her hands. A deep rumble rolled through his chest, vibrating up through her palms where they pressed against his blood-slick fur. But he didn't bite. Those massive jaws stayed closed. Those eyes stayed fixed on her face, watchful despite the exhaustion dragging at him. "I know," Isolda whispered as she carefully wiped dirt and rust from the torn flesh. "I know it hurts." Blood flowed warm over her fingers. Strange how familiar this felt. As if she'd done this 100 times before. As if this moment had been written in some book she'd never read, in some language she didn't speak but understood in her bones. She scattered crushed mugwort into the wound and pressed spiderwebs onto the worst of the bleeding. The wolf whimpered, a sound that went through her like a blade, high and broken and so painfully vulnerable from something so large and dangerous. Then he fell still. Too still. His head lolled to the side. For one terrible, heart-stopping moment, Isolda thought she'd lost him. "No, no." The word came out sharp, desperate. She laid her hand on his chest, feeling for a heartbeat. "No, don't you dare." There, weak but steady, still beating. He'd only lost consciousness, passed out from the pain and blood loss and shock. Isolda exhaled shakily. Her hands trembled as she wrapped his leg with long strips of cloth she tore from her second dress, the only other dress she owned. The one she wore to check traps in summer. She wound the bandages tight, layering them until the bleeding slowed to a seep. The wolf lay motionless in her bed, massive and beautiful and terrifying all at once. His fur was thicker than she'd expected, coarser near the skin, silky on the surface. He smelled like the deep forest, like pine resin and winter wind and something else. Something she couldn't name, like smoke and thunderstorms and dark honey. Night crept in through the cracks in her walls. The temperature dropped. Even with the fire burning, she could see her breath misting before her face. The storm outside raged like a living thing, wind shrieking through the trees, battering her small hut. Isolda pulled her second blanket over the wolf, thin and patched more holes than fabric. She sat by the fire and tried to get warm. After an hour, the cold had crept so deep she couldn't feel her toes. Her lips were blue. And the wolf, his large body, had begun to shake. Not the tremors of waking, the involuntary shudders of hypothermia. She recognized the signs. She'd nearly died of cold exposure twice. His body had lost too much blood, couldn't generate enough heat, couldn't warm itself. Isolda stood, her joints stiff with cold. She stared down at the shivering wolf. This was insane, absolutely insane. But if she let him die after working so hard to save him, after using her last firewood and her last clean cloth and her only other dress, then what had been the point of any of it? "You're a fool, Isolda," she muttered to herself. Then she crawled onto the bed beside him. The bearskin beneath them was the softest thing she owned, the warmest. She pulled it over them both and pressed carefully against the wolf's side, the one that wasn't injured. His body was massive, radiating heat despite the shivers. She laid her head against his broad shoulder and felt his chest rise and fall beneath her cheek. The trembling gradually eased. His breathing deepened, evened out. Isolda closed her eyes. For the first time in 14 years, longer than she could remember, she didn't feel alone. The wolf shifted slightly beneath her, and she froze, every muscle tensing, waiting for pain, for teeth in her throat. But instead she felt a deep vibrating sound, not a growl, something gentler, almost like the purr of a barn cat, but lower, deeper. It rumbled through his chest and into her bones. "You're strange," she whispered into his fur, "for a monster." His eyes, half closed with exhaustion, found hers in the firelight, and in them she saw something that made her breath catch, something that made her heart skip and stumble. Recognition, as if he knew her, as if he'd been waiting for her. As if this moment, this impossible frozen moment, had been inevitable since the day she was born. Isolda shook the thought away. She was exhausted, delirious with cold and hunger and the shock of everything that had happened. Her mind was playing tricks, seeing things that weren't there. She buried her face deeper in his fur and let the warmth of his body seep into her frozen bones. The fire crackled. The storm howled outside her thin walls. And somewhere between one breath and the next, between the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and the rise and fall of his massive chest, Isolda slipped into sleep. In her dreams, she heard a voice, deep and rough as molten metal, raw as an open wound. Finally. But when she woke to the pale gray light of dawn filtering through the cracks in her walls, she didn't remember the dream, didn't remember the voice. She only remembered warmth. Isolda woke to heat. Not the familiar warmth of the dying fire across the room, not the insufficient heat of her threadbare blankets. This was different, intense, alive, like sleeping next to a forge. Her fingers lay on naked skin. She froze. Her mind took a long, stumbling moment to understand what she was feeling. No more coarse fur, no more thick winter coat, just skin. Smooth, hot skin that moved with breath and the play of muscle beneath. Her heart stopped. She ripped her eyes open. A man loomed above her. Not a man, something more, something forged from violence and shadow and ancient power. He was naked, completely naked. His body was a work of brutal art scars and muscle carved by hard battles and harder years. Broad shoulders, a chest that rose and fell like a bellows, arms corded with strength, and scars. God, so many scars. White lines crisscrossing his torso like a map of pain. Isolda's gaze traveled up to his face, hard as beaten iron. A jaw that looked like it could bite through steel, high cheekbones sharp enough to cut, a straight nose that had been broken at least once, lips full and cruel all at once, and above his left eyebrow a long white scar running to his temple. But his eyes were the same. Gold, liquid burning gold. The wolf's eyes. Isolda wanted to scream, to run, but her body wouldn't obey. She lay pinned beneath him, one of his large hands braced beside her head on the bearskin. The other rested on her hip, possessive, or firm. The heat of his palm burned through the thin fabric of her dress. "You," she managed. Her whisper broke off. He didn't move, just stared down at her with those impossible eyes, and his gaze was so intense, so focused, she felt like he could read every thought she'd ever had, every secret, every fear. Slowly, carefully, as if calming a startled deer, he lowered his head. She felt his breath on her skin, warm, terrifyingly close. "Who?" Isolda tried again, her voice barely more than a rasp. "Who are you?" His nostrils flared as if he were breathing her in, learning her scent. Then a sound came from deep in his chest. A growl, not threatening, not a warning. Something else entirely. Something that sent heat coiling through her belly in a way she didn't understand. She should push him away, should demand answers, should do anything except lie here trapped under his weight, his gaze this electric tension that hummed between them like the air before lightning strikes. "Speak to me," Isolda whispered, "please." His free hand moved from her hip, glided slowly upward over her ribs, her collarbone, the curve of her throat, until his fingers gently cupped her chin. He turned her head to the side with inexorable gentleness, exposing her neck. Every instinct screamed that this was submission, that she was in mortal danger, that baring her throat to a predator was the last mistake she'd ever make. But then she felt his lips. They brushed the place where her pulse hammered wildly beneath her skin. "Mine," he growled, the first word he'd spoken. His voice was dark, hoarse, rough as gravel, as if it hadn't been used in a very long time. And that word, that single possessive word, made her entire body shudder. "What?" Isolda tried to move, but his hand held her chin firm. Not painfully, but unyielding as stone. He lifted his head, those eyes bored into hers. "You touched my blood without fear." "I was afraid," Isolda protested. Her voice came out breathless. "But you did it anyway." His voice grew deeper, satisfied. "You saved me, little healer. You dipped your hands in my blood and closed my wounds. You don't know what that means. Then explain it to me. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his lips. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predator's smile. The smile of something that had just found exactly what it had been hunting for. It means you belong to me. Heat flashed through Isolda. Part fear, part something else. Something that made her skin feel too tight. I belong to no one, she hissed. He laughed, a deep rolling sound that made her ribs vibrate, made the air in the small room feel charged. Yes, he said, you belong to me, because I belong to you. That's how fate works, little healer. Who are you really? The words came out barely above a whisper. His eyes grew serious, ancient, as if something older than mountains looked out from behind them. Kaelor, he said, eighth king of the Shadowlands, the Black Wolf, the monster mothers warn their children about in the dark. Isolda stared at him. Her mind struggled to process the words. You're the Wolf King. And you, his fingers stroked her cheek with devastating gentleness, are my queen, whether you want it or not. The pounding on her door shattered the moment like an axe through ice. Open up, witch! The voice crashed through the thin wooden door like a battering ram. We know you're in there. Kaelor moved faster than should have been possible. One moment he lay above her. The next he stood beside the bed bearing full weight on the leg that had been mangled 12 hours ago. The bandages Isolda had wrapped so carefully were gone. In their place, angry red scars marked his skin, healed. Impossibly healed. The hunters, Isolda whispered, scrambling off the bed. Her legs shook. They must have followed the blood trail. Stay behind me. Kaelor's voice was no longer the rough velvet that had murmured against her throat. This was command, honed, sharp, and absolute. You can't, Isolda said. You're naked. You were hurt. I don't need clothes to kill men. The casual way he said it, flat and certain as fact, sent ice down her spine. Witch? The pounding grew harder. Wood splintered. Give us the wolf. We caught him first. The beast is ours. Kaelor walked to the door, every movement precise as a blade. He put one hand on the latch. Kaelor, no, he ripped it open. 4 men stood outside in the snow. Large, crude figures in dirty fur coats, their breath misting in the frozen air. Armed with axes and long hunting knives. Isolda recognized them instantly. Branimir, her father's son from his second marriage. Sheriff Corvus in his worn leather badge. And 2 of Corvus's deputies, thick-necked brutes who beat their wives on Saturday nights and dragged themselves to church on Sunday mornings. They froze at the sight of Kaelor. What in the 7 hells? Branimir stumbled back a step. Kaelor said nothing. He just stood there naked and utterly unbothered, and the air around him seemed to shimmer, seemed to vibrate with something Isolda could feel but not name. Ancient power, dark and absolute as the space between stars. The wolf, Corvus stammered. His hand went to the knife at his belt but didn't draw it. Couldn't draw it. Where's the wolf we tracked here? Dead, Isolda lied quickly, stepping beside Kaelor. The cold air bit at her skin through her thin dress. I tried to save him, but he died in the night. Branimir's eyes narrowed. They were her father's eyes, cold gray like winter ice. Liar. We saw fresh blood. The trail leads right to your door. His gaze slid to Kaelor, suspicious, calculating. And who's this? Your new lover started bringing men out of the forest like a cheap. The rest of his sentence turned into a scream. Kaelor moved so fast, Isolda barely saw it. One moment he stood still. The next his hand gripped Branimir's wrist. The sound of bone breaking was distinct. Clear, like a branch snapping under too much weight. The knife fell from Branimir's hand into the snow. You, Kaelor growled, his voice so deep it was barely human. Don't speak about her that way. Ever again. The 2 deputies stumbled backward, axes forgotten. But Branimir, stupid with pain or desperate or something worse, tried to wrench free. You don't know who we are? He spat through gritted teeth. We're the law in Frostvale. We'll dead men, Kaelor finished it quietly. That's what you are. You set the trap. You wanted to kill me for a pelt, for gold. The wolf belonged to us. Branimir's voice pitched high with fear and fury. We tracked it for 3 days. I belonged to no one but her. Kaelor's eyes found Isolda's for just a moment, burning and absolutely certain. And now you'll die. Not because you hunted me, but because you dared break down her door. Kaelor. Isolda put a hand on his arm. The muscle beneath her palm was hard as stone, vibrating with controlled violence. Not in front of me. Please. He looked at her. For a long moment, something played across his face. the struggle between monster and man. Between the wolf that wanted to tear and rend, and the king who understood mercy. Slowly, with visible effort, he released Branimir. The man collapsed in the snow, clutching his shattered wrist. Go, Kaelor said, his voice cut like a blade through winter air. Back to your pathetic village, and tell everyone, the Black Wolf lives, and anyone who dares threaten this woman won't see the next sunrise. Corvus grabbed Branimir by his good arm. The deputies were already running, stumbling through the snow like frightened children, but Branimir twisted back his face, contorted with pain and wounded pride and hate so pure it made the air taste bitter. You'll regret this, witch, he hissed at Isolda. You and your monster both. The whole village will come. We'll burn you out. Will, Kaelor growled, a sound so animal, so purely predatory that all four men ran. Slipping and falling and scrambling away through the drifts, fear driving them faster than their legs could carry. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Cold wind poured through the gap. Silence fell. Isolda exhaled shakily. Her hands trembled. Only now did she notice her whole body was shaking. Kaelor turned to her. His face softened in a way that seemed wrong on features carved from violence. You should have let me kill them. Now they'll come back, Isolda whispered, with more men. The whole village. Then I'll kill more. He stepped closer, pulled her into his arms with a gentleness that contradicted everything she'd just witnessed. Don't be afraid, Isolda. I won't let anyone hurt you. I'm not afraid for me. She looked up at him, at this impossible man who'd been a dying wolf 12 hours ago. I'm afraid for you. A sound rumbled through his chest, deep and satisfied, almost like that strange purr from the night before. First time in 3 centuries someone's been afraid for me instead of afraid of me. You're impossible. And you're mine. He kissed her forehead, soft, almost reverent. Now pack your things, little healer. We're leaving. Where? His eyes gleamed in the weak morning light. Home, to Fellstone Keep, where you belong. Isolda didn't have much to pack. 14 years of survival had taught her not to accumulate possessions. Everything she owned fit in a canvas sack no bigger than a loaf of bread. Her mother's grimoire, the leather binding worn soft with age, the pages filled with careful drawings of herbs and healing instructions in Eloan's slanting script. 2 dresses, one she was wearing, one she'd torn into bandages last night, the small wooden box of dried herbs, mugwort, willow bark, yarrow comfrey root, all gathered and preserved according to the grimoire's instructions, her hunting knife, the only thing her father had given her before abandoning her. 6 inches of steel with a bone handle kept sharp enough to shave with, 3 strips of dried rabbit meat. Her entire food supply. That was it. That was everything. While she gathered her meager belongings, Kaelor dressed, or rather clothing simply appeared on his body. One moment he stood naked, the next he wore black leather pants that strained across his thighs and a loose shirt that barely covered the breadth of his chest. A long cloak materialized last heavy wolf fur so dark it seemed to drink the light. Magic. Real magic. Not the hedge witch nonsense the villagers accused her of. This was power that bent reality. Are you ready? Kaelor asked quietly. Isolda looked around the small hut. 4 walls, a roof that leaked when it rained, a hearth that never warmed the corners, a bed she'd slept in alone for 14 winters. It hadn't been much, but it had been hers. Her only safe place in a world that didn't want her. I know what you're thinking. Kaelor's arms wrapped around her waist from behind, pulling her against his chest. His chin rested on top of her head. You think you're giving all this up, but you're not. You're just trading one prison for a kingdom. And if I don't want to stay in your kingdom, her voice came out smaller than she intended. His lips brushed her temple. I'll convince you to stay, every single day, until you want to. Isolda turned in his arms, looked up at this man who was also a wolf, who was also a king who decided she belonged to him based on nothing but fate and blood. You don't give up, do you? Never. His eyes were utterly serious. I've lived 318 years, Isolda, 3 centuries of war and loneliness and blood. And in all that time, I never believed in fate, never believed the old stories about fated mates and soul bonds. He cupped her face in his hands, calloused palms rough against her cheeks. Until last night, until I woke in your arms and knew with every fiber of my being that I was finally home. Isolda's heart squeezed in her chest. This was insane, absolutely insane. This is crazy, she whispered. I know. A crooked smile touched his lips. The first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost human. Will you come anyway? She should say no, should be sensible, should recognize this for the madness it was. But looking into those eyes, feeling the solid warmth of him around her, remembering the loneliness that had been her only companion for 14 years, yes, his smile blazed like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Good. He took her canvas sack and slung it over his shoulder as if it weighed nothing. Then before she could protest, he lifted her. One arm under her knees, one around her back, cradling her against his chest like she was something precious. I can walk, Isolda said. I know. He kicked the broken door open. But I want to carry you. A queen doesn't walk through snow. She's carried. Outside they waited. Wolves, dozens of them, massive shadows in the snow, each one nearly as large as Kaelor in his animal form. Gray, brown, black, silver, a living carpet of fur and muscle and glowing intelligent eyes. Isolda's breath caught. My pack, Kaelor said quietly. Your guard from now on. The largest wolf stepped forward, a silver-gray female with a scar bisecting her left eye. She lowered her massive head, not to Kaelor, to Isolda. They accept you, Kaelor whispered against her ear, as their queen, as their Luna. Tears pricked Isolda's eyes. She'd had no one her whole life, been wanted by no one, belonged nowhere. And now an entire army of impossible creatures bowed to her. Kaelor set off carrying her through the snow as if she weighed nothing. The wolves formed an escort around them, a living, breathing wall of fur and teeth and ancient power. Where exactly are we going? Isolda asked. North, into the heart of the Shadowlands. His eyes found hers. To Fellstone Keep, where I'll seat you on my throne, where I'll claim you before the whole world is mine. And if I want more than just a throne, his grip tightened, then I'll give you everything. My kingdom, my pack, my heart, everything. Your heart, she raised an eyebrow. That's quite a claim from someone I met 12 hours ago. It's been yours since last night, Isolda. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. You healed it when you healed my leg, when you chose to save a monster instead of leaving it to die. Isolda laid her head against his shoulder, closed her eyes, let herself just for a moment believe this impossible thing might be real. The wind carried them north. Around them the wolves sang, a deep ancient song of homecoming and destiny and things written in blood and starlight. They walked through forests that grew progressively darker. Snow transformed into black earth. Trees grew larger, their branches so dense barely any light penetrated the canopy. The temperature rose slightly, not warm but no longer the killing cold of the glacier peaks. Isolda had never traveled this far north, had never left the small territory around Frostvale in her hut. The world opened before her like a book written in languages she'd never learned. The wolves moved in perfect formation, silent despite their size. Occasionally, the silver-gray female would drop back to walk beside Kaelor, and he would speak to her in a language Isolda didn't recognize, guttural and flowing all at once. The wolf would huff responses and Kaelor would nod as if they were having a perfectly normal conversation. Her name is Saren, Kaelor said, noticing Isolda watching. My second in command. She's been with me for 97 years. 97? Isolda shook her head. How long do your people live? Shifters 4, maybe 500 years if we're lucky, longer if we're not. Something dark crossed his face. Living a long time isn't always a blessing, little healer. Is that why you were alone, why you got caught? Kaelor's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. I was hunting, he finally said. 3 days out from Fellstone, tracking a threat to my territory. I didn't expect silver traps. Didn't expect... He stopped. Someone knew where I'd be. Someone wanted me caught. I slid down Isolda's spine. Someone in your own kingdom. Perhaps. His arms tightened around her, which is why you need to be careful when we arrive. Not everyone will welcome a human Luna. Not everyone will be happy that I've found my mate. Then why take me there? He looked down at her, eyes burning with certainty. Because you're safer at my side than anywhere else in this world. Because I'll kill anyone who tries to hurt you. And because, his voice softened, because I'm selfish enough to want you with me even if it means danger. By midday, the sky darkened. Not the natural dimming of afternoon, but something wrong. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in minutes. Snow began falling sideways, then upward. Magic, Kaelor growled, setting Isolda on her feet. Someone's trying to stop us. The pack circled defensive. Saren snarled at the unnatural blizzard. Kaelor stumbled. His hand went to his leg, the one Isolda had bandaged. His face went pale. The silver, Isolda said, understanding flooding through her. It's not all out, is it? I thought I'd healed. He collapsed to one knee. Isolda caught him, or tried to. He was too heavy, but she got her shoulder under his arm, took his weight. There, she spotted a dark opening in the rock face. A cave. Come on! The pack helped. Seren on one side, Isolda on the other, they half-dragged Kaelor into the shelter. The moment they crossed the threshold, the magical blizzard intensified outside, trying to drive them back out, trying to kill them. Inside, Isolda built a fire with shaking hands. The wolves brought dry wood in their jaws. Somehow they knew what she needed. Kaelor lay on his side shaking. His skin burned with fever. When Isolda peeled back his pant leg, she saw 3 silver fragments still embedded deep in the muscle. Missed in her first treatment because they'd been driven in so far. I have to take them out, she said. Do it. His voice was tight with pain. Isolda heated her knife in the fire until it glowed red. She had no numbing herbs left. No way to ease this. I'm sorry, she whispered. She cut. Kaelor screamed, his body convulsed. Claws erupted from his fingernails, tearing furrows in the cave floor. His eyes flashed between gold and pure feral yellow. The wolf trying to surface, trying to escape the pain. But he didn't hurt her. Even half-shifted, even in agony, he turned his face away, bit his own arm to keep from biting her. Isolda worked fast. 1 fragment. 2. The third was deep wedged against bone. She had to dig for it, had to cut deeper than she wanted. Kaelor's screams echoed off stone. Finally, it came free. A chunk of silver the size of her thumbnail gleaming with his blood. She packed the wound with yarrow, wrapped it tight, and collapsed beside him. Kaelor pulled her close despite the pain, despite the fever. His whole body shook. Thank you, he whispered against her hair. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never, Isolda said. I'll never give up on you. She sang the healing chant, the words her mother had written in the grimoire. Ancient words in a language she didn't speak, but somehow knew. And slowly, gradually, Kaelor's shaking eased. His breathing evened. The fever broke. In the morning they found it, the device that had created the blizzard. A runestone carved with intricate symbols, and on its base stamped in iron the crest of Fellstone Keep. Someone in Kaelor's own castle had tried to kill him. Keep it, Kaelor said, his voice hard. We'll need it as evidence. The second day brought wolves, not Kaelor's pack. Rogues. 35 of them, lean and scarred, led by a massive gray alpha with a torn ear. They materialized from the forest like ghosts surrounding Kaelor's group. Stand down, Blackfang, the gray alpha growled. He could speak, Isolda realized. All the alphas could speak in their wolf form. Your time as king is done. The human doesn't belong. Thorn, Kaelor's voice was ice. Still leading rogues into suicide. No suicide, a reckoning. Thorn's lips pulled back. You've grown weak, soft, taking a human mate. The pack deserves better. Battle erupted. It was chaos. Fur and fangs and blood. Kaelor fought in human form using nothing but his bare hands and the kind of speed that made him blur. But his pack was outnumbered. Within minutes, 19 of Kaelor's warriors lay wounded. Severe wounds, throats torn, bellies / legs broken. And on Thorn's side, his beta, a young black wolf, was dying. Chest caved in, lung collapsed. Pink foam bubbling from his mouth. Stop! Isolda stepped between the two sides. Stop this, Thorn snarled at her. The human speaks. How amusing. I'm a healer, Isolda said. Her voice didn't shake. Miracle of miracles. Your beta is dying. So are some of Kaelor's pack. Let me prove I'm not just human. Let me prove I deserve to be Luna. Thorn's eyes narrowed. You'd heal my beta after we attacked you? A healer doesn't choose sides, Isolda said. She chooses life. Silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. You have 1 hour, Thorn said. Heal Kael. If he lives, we leave in peace. If he dies, his teeth flashed. We finish this. Isolda knelt beside the dying wolf, Kael. He was young, maybe 20 in human years. His eyes were glazing over. Stay with me, she whispered. She worked by instinct in her mother's grimoire, made a chest tube from a hollow reed she found near a stream. Packed the wound with bog moss, her grimoire said it prevented infection better than anything. And she sang. The healing chant rose from her throat stronger than before. Her hands glowed faintly silver. She didn't notice, was too focused on saving a life. 47 minutes later, Kael's eyes opened. He looked at Isolda, looked at his alpha. Her voice, Kael rasped. It's like the old stories. The moon's chosen, the mothers of old. Thorn stared. Then slowly he lowered his massive head. I was wrong, he said. You are more than human healer. You carry something ancient. He looked at Kaelor. We will join you. 35 wolves pledged to your Luna. Isolda's pack had just grown to 82. On the third day, they reached Nightwater River. The barrier shimmered across the water like heat haze. Kaelor crossed first, testing it. The wolves followed. But when Isolda tried to step into the river, the water pushed her back. Not physically. It was gentler than that, but absolute. No, Kaelor said. He splashed back to her side. No, there has to be a way. Only true Shadowland blood can cross, Sirin said quietly, having shifted to human form. She was a tall woman with the same silver-gray hair as her wolf form. It's been this way for 1,000 years, to keep invaders out. Then I'm not Shadowland blood, Isolda said. Her heart was breaking. After everything to be stopped by a river, then I stay here, Kaelor said flatly. With you. If you can't cross, I don't cross. Don't be stupid. You think I'd choose a kingdom over you? His voice cracked. I've been alone for 300 years, Isolda. Alone and cursed and half mad. And in one day you've given me more life than 3 centuries of ruling. So yes, I'll stay, right here. Forever, if that's what it takes. Isolda's throat burned. You can't. I will. Wait. Isolda pulled out her grimoire. Her hands shook as she flipped through pages. Mother wrote something. About our bloodline. About here. She read aloud, Greythorn women carry the old magic. Moon blessed. Water hears us. Water knows us. Try, Kaelor urged. Please. Isolda stepped to the water's edge, closed her eyes, sang the healing chant but changed the words. Asked instead of commanded. Asked the water to recognize her, to remember. Her eyes opened. They were glowing pure silver. The river parted. Not violently, gently, like a curtain pulled aside by an old friend. And a voice, ancient feminine, echoing from everywhere and nowhere spoke, Daughter of Elowen, bridge between worlds, we have waited for you. Welcome home. Isolda stepped onto the river bottom, dry as desert sand. The water held its shape around her, a tunnel through the current. The pack crossed behind her, silent with awe. When they reached the far shore, the water closed, resumed its flow as if nothing had happened. Kaelor pulled Isolda into his arms, buried his face in her hair. You're not human, he whispered. You never were. You're something older, something sacred. Isolda thought about her mother, her grandmother, the long line of Greythorn healers stretching back into legend. Maybe he was right. Before them, the forest opened. And there, rising from the mist like a dark dream made solid, stood Fellstone Keep. Fellstone Keep rose from the mist like something out of a fever dream. A massive fortress of black stone, 7 towers stabbing into the gray sky. Walls so thick an army could march along their tops. Gates tall enough to swallow giants. It was beautiful and terrible all at once. Ancient, powerful. The kind of place where kings ruled and wars were planned and legends were born. Welcome home, Kaelor whispered. The gates opened as they approached. Massive iron things that groaned like dying beasts. Guards in black armor lined the walls, but Isolda noticed they wore no helmets, because they weren't human. Their eyes gleamed gold and silver and amber. Shifters, all of them. The wolves poured through the gates like a flood of fur and muscle. Kaelor carried Isolda through the courtyard where servants stopped and stared. Some bowed, others whispered behind their hands. He ignored them all, strode straight into the great hall. The door slammed open at his approach. The room beyond took Isolda's breath away. Massive didn't begin to describe it. The ceiling soared 3 stories high. Walls of polished obsidian caught the light from hundreds of candles burning in iron chandeliers. The floor was white marble, veined with black, so perfectly polished she could see her reflection. And at the far end on a raised dais 2 thrones. One carved from black stone, all sharp angles and wolf imagery. The seat of power. The other was white marble. Empty. Waiting. Carved with roses and vines and delicate feminine strength. Yours, Kaelor said, setting her gently on the white throne. If you want it. Isolda stared at the throne, at the hall, at this impossible life being offered to her. You're giving me a choice. Always. Kaelor knelt before her. This mighty king knelt at her feet like a supplicant. He took her hands in his, dwarfing her small fingers with his scarred palms. I'll never force you, Isolda. You can leave if you want. Stay if you want. Hate me or love me or both. But I'll be here. Every day. Waiting. How long? Her voice cracked. Forever if I must. Isolda looked down at him, at this impossible man with wolf eyes and a heart broken by 3 centuries of loneliness, at the hands holding hers so carefully as if she might shatter. And she knew. The choice had been made long ago. In the moment she'd knelt in the snow and freed him from that trap. "I'll stay," she whispered. "Not because I have to, because I want to." His smile was everything. Joy and relief and something deeper. Something that looked like hope. He stood, pulled her into his arms and kissed her. Outside, the wolves lifted their voices, a song of triumph and celebration that shook the very foundations of the keep. Isolda had saved a wolf from a trap, and he'd freed her from hers. But as Kaelor's lips moved against hers as the pack howled their approval, neither of them noticed the figures watching from the shadows at the back of the great hall. 7 figures in dark robes, the Elder Council, and in their eyes gleamed something that had nothing to do with joy. The kiss ended, but the heat of it lingered on Isolda's lips like a brand. Kaelor pulled back slowly, his eyes searching her face as if memorizing every detail. His thumb traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "My queen," he murmured. "My Luna. Your Majesty." The voice cut through the moment like a blade through silk. Cold. Formal. Perfectly measured to sound respectful, while conveying anything but. Kaelor's entire body went rigid. His hand dropped from Isolda's face, but he kept himself positioned between her and the voice, protective without being obvious about it. Isolda looked past his shoulder. 7 figures emerged from the shadows at the hall's far end. They moved in perfect unison, their dark robes whispering against the marble floor. 6 men broad-shouldered and silver-haired, with the bearing of warriors gone to politics. And at their center, a woman. She was tall, regal, perhaps 60 years old, with iron-gray hair pulled back in an elaborate braid. Her face was all sharp angles and aristocratic bones, beautiful in a cold, untouchable way. Her eyes were pale blue, almost colorless, and they fixed on Isolda with the focused intensity of a hunting hawk spotting prey. "Elder Morwenna," Kaelor said. His voice had gone flat. All the warmth he'd shown Isolda vanished, replaced by something hard and carefully neutral. "I didn't expect the council to convene so quickly." "News travels fast, Your Majesty." Morwenna glided forward, the 6 other elders flanking her like an honor guard. "Especially news of your miraculous recovery. We were told you'd been caught in a hunter's trap, that you were near death." Her gaze slid to Isolda. "Yet here you stand, whole and hale. It seems we have someone to thank for that." The way she said someone made Isolda's skin prickle. "This is Isolda Greythorn," Kaelor said. His hand found Isolda's, pulled her forward to stand beside him. Equal, not behind. "My fated mate, your Luna Queen." The silence that followed could have crushed diamonds. Then Morwenna smiled. It was a beautiful smile, warm and welcoming and absolutely false. "How wonderful," she clasped her hands together. "A fated mate, we'd nearly given up hope after all these years, Your Majesty. 3 centuries without a queen, it's been so difficult for the kingdom." She descended the steps toward them. The other elders followed like shadows, and a human no less. Morwenna's eyes swept over Isolda, taking in the threadbare dress, the worn boots, the canvas sack that held everything she owned. "How unexpected. But the moon works in mysterious ways, does she not?" "She does," Kaelor said carefully. Morwenna stopped 3 paces away, close enough to seem friendly, far enough to maintain formality. "You must forgive us, my dear," she said to Isolda. "We're simply overwhelmed with joy. It's been so long since Felstone had a Luna, so very long since our king had someone to stand beside him." Isolda felt Kaelor's hand tighten on hers, a warning or reassurance. She couldn't tell which. "I understand this must be supporting," Isolda said, kept her voice steady despite the cold weight settling in her stomach. "Surprising." Morwenna laughed, a crystalline sound that echoed off the obsidian walls. "My dear child, it's miraculous. A human woman all alone in the wilderness just happens to find our king at his most vulnerable, just happens to possess the skills to save his life, just happens to be his fated mate." She tilted her head. "What are the odds?" The question hung in the air like poison. "The moon doesn't deal in odds," Kaelor said. His voice held an edge now, sharp and dangerous. "She deals in fate." "Of course, Your Majesty. Of course, Wellness." Morwenna's smile never wavered. "We would never question the moon's will, which is why we've prepared the Queen's proving, to honor tradition, to celebrate this joyous occasion properly." Isolda felt Kaelor go very still beside her. "The proving hasn't been invoked in 200 years, he said quietly. "Precisely because we haven't had a Luna candidate in 200 years. Morwenna spread her hands. "But tradition is tradition, Your Majesty. Surely you of all people understand the importance of honoring the old ways." "What's the Queen's proving?" Isolda asked. Morwenna's pale eyes locked onto hers. A simple trial, my dear, to prove your worth to the kingdom, to demonstrate that you possess the strength, wisdom, and capability to stand as our Luna. What kind of trial? A test of your greatest gift. Morwenna's smile widened. Kaelor tells us you're a healer. How fortunate. We have 50 warriors injured in recent training exercises. Terrible accidents, truly. If you can heal them all within 12 hours, you'll have proven yourself worthy of the throne. 50 warriors in 12 hours. Isolda's mind raced. That was barely 14 minutes per patient. Impossible if they had serious injuries. Is that too difficult? Morwenna's voice dripped false concern. Perhaps we've overestimated your abilities. We could reduce it to 40 warriors, or 30, though of course a true Luna should be capable of. 50 is fine, Isolda said. Kaelor's head whipped toward her. Isolda? When does the trial begin? She asked Morwenna. The elder's eyes gleamed with something that might have been triumph. Dawn tomorrow. That gives you time to rest, prepare. We wouldn't want you to face the proving while exhausted. How generous, Kaelor said. His voice could have frozen fire. We live to serve, your majesty. Morwenna bowed just deep enough to be respectful, just shallow enough to suggest she was doing him a favor. Come, brothers. Let us prepare the healing hall. The 7 elders glided away their robes, whispering secrets against stone. When they were gone, Kaelor released a breath that sounded like a growl. It's a trap. I know, Isolda said. He turned to her. You don't have to do this. I can refuse the proving, invoke my authority as king, and undermine your own rule. Isolda shook her head. They'd use it against you, say you were weak, that you broke tradition for a human woman. I don't care what they say. I do. Isolda squeezed his hand. I care that they're testing you through me. I care that refusing would give them ammunition. And I care, she swallowed. I care that if I'm going to be your queen, I need to prove I can be. Kaelor stared at her. Then suddenly he laughed. A real laugh, rough and genuine. Gods, you're magnificent. He pulled her against his chest. 300 years, and I find the one woman stubborn enough to match me. Is that a compliment? The highest. He kissed the top of her head. But I'm coming with you tomorrow. And if I see any sign, any hint that this trial is rigged, you'll let me handle it, Isolda said firmly. I didn't survive 14 winters alone by being helpless. His arms tightened around her. No, you survived by being extraordinary. Dawn came too soon. Isolda woke to Kaelor already dressed, standing by the window of her chambers, staring out at the gray morning light. His shoulders were rigid. Tension radiated from him like heat from a forge. How long have you been awake? She asked. I didn't sleep. He turned. His eyes were shadowed with something that looked like dread. I kept thinking about what they might have done, what they might be planning. Isolda rose from the massive bed, crossed to him, took his hands in hers. Whatever it is, I'll handle it. You shouldn't have to handle anything. His jaw clenched. You should be safe, protected, not walking into some political game designed to destroy you. Life isn't about should, Isolda squeezed his fingers. It's about what is. And what is right now is that I have a trial to face. A servant knocked, entered with breakfast. Isolda forced herself to eat, though her stomach twisted with nerves. Kaelor watched her like a hawk, noting every bite, every swallow. When she finished, he helped her into a healer's tunic. Simple brown leather, practical and sturdy. Someone had left it folded on the chair. Along with it, a leather satchel containing basic supplies. Bandages, clean cloth, a water skin. Not nearly enough for 50 patients, but then they didn't want her to succeed. Ready, Kaelor asked. No. Isolda met his eyes. But let's go anyway. The healing hall was a massive stone chamber in the keep's east wing. Morning light poured through high windows, illuminating rows of beds. 50 beds each, occupied by a warrior in various states of injury. Or so it appeared. Isolda stepped into the room and immediately knew something was wrong. The injuries were too severe, too specific. These weren't training accidents. Warriors didn't accidentally get identical deep lacerations on their sword arms. Didn't all happen to have matching puncture wounds that looked suspiciously like silver poisoning. This was deliberate. Elder Morwenna stood at the hall's center, her pale eyes gleaming with false sympathy. The other 6 council members flanked her like carrion birds waiting for something to die. Good morning, my dear, Morwenna's voice echoed off stone. I trust you slept well. Well enough, Isolda said. Wonderful, then you're ready to begin. Morwenna gestured to the rows of injured warriors. 50 of our finest, all injured in recent training. Such terrible accidents, you have until sunset. 12 hours to heal them all. Isolda walked slowly down the first row examining the warriors. Young men, most of them. Their eyes tracked her with expressions ranging from hope to suspicion to outright hostility. She stopped at the third bed. The warrior there was maybe 20, with a deep gash across his forearm that gleamed with silver residue. "What's your name?" she asked quietly. "Lysander, my lady." His voice was tight with pain. "How did this happen, Lysander?" He hesitated, glanced at Morwenna. "Training accident, my lady." With a silver blade, his eyes widened slightly. It's all right." Isolda lowered her voice to a whisper. "Just tell me true. Was this an accident?" Lysander's jaw worked, then so quietly she almost missed it. "No, my lady. Elder Morwenna ordered it, said it was to test you properly." Ice flooded Isolda's veins. She straightened, looked across the hall at Morwenna. The elder smiled. Perfectly pleasant, perfectly false. Isolda turned to Kaelor, who stood by the door with Seren and a dozen other wolves. His face was carved from granite. Rage simmered in his eyes. He'd heard. With his shifter hearing, he'd heard every word. Isolda shook her head slightly. "Not yet. Not now." She walked back to the hall's center, faced Morwenna directly. "These warriors were deliberately inured," she said clearly, "with silver, to make them harder to heal." Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. Servants, guards, pack members who'd gathered to watch the trial. Morwenna's smile never wavered. "What a terrible accusation, my dear. Do you have proof?" "The wounds are identical. The silver poisoning consistent across all 50 warriors. That doesn't happen by accident." "Perhaps you're simply looking for excuses." Morwenna tilted her head, preparing to fail and blame others for your inadequacy. Fury blazed through Isolda, hot and cleansing. "I'm not going to fail," she said quietly. "But I'm also not going to heal 50 warriors in 12 hours. Shocked silence. Kaelor straightened. "Isolda." "I'm going to heal 12, she continued. "The 12 with critical injuries. The ones who will die without immediate treatment." She gestured to Lysander and 11 others she'd identified. "The rest have wounds that are serious but not fatal. They can wait." "That's not the trial," and Morwenna's voice cracked, just slightly. "The trial is 50 warriors in 12 hours. The trial," Isolda said, meeting her pale eyes steadily, "is to prove I can be your Luna. To prove I have the strength and wisdom to lead. Well, a leader knows the difference between important and urgent. A leader doesn't waste resources on politics while people die." She turned to the crowd, raised her voice. "I'm going to save 12 lives today. The 12 who truly need saving. And then I'm going to prove that this entire trial was rigged from the start." "You can't prove anything," Morwenna snapped. "Can't I?" Isolda pulled the grimoire from her satchel. Her mother's book carried through 14 winters. "This is a healer's journal. It documents every herb, every treatment, every cure known to my bloodline. And it includes detailed descriptions of silver poisoning, the specific wounds it causes, the patterns it creates." She flipped to a page, held it up. "See these drawings? My mother documented identical injuries 80 years ago. During the Silver Wars, when packs used silver weapons against each other." Isolda's voice rang clear. "These warriors don't have training wounds. They have war wounds deliberately inflicted." The murmurs grew louder. Morwenna's face paled. "This proves nothing. You could have faked those drawings." "Mother didn't fake anything." A new voice. Everyone turned. A young woman stood in the doorway, perhaps 17, with the same dark hair as the injured warriors. The same eyes. A shifter, but dressed in servant's clothing. She stepped forward, trembling but determined. "My name is Ravenna," she said. "I serve in the Elder Council's chambers, and I heard Elder Morwenna give the orders. She told Captain Draven to injure 50 warriors with silver blades. Told him to make it look like accidents. Said it was to ensure the human would fail the trial." "Lies," Morwenna hissed. "She's lying to protect the human." "Am I?" Ravenna reached into her apron, pulled out a folded parchment. "This is the order you wrote, Elder, in your own hand, instructing the captain exactly how to wound the warriors." She handed it to Kaelor. The king's face went very still as he read. When he looked up, his eyes burned like molten gold. "This is treason," he said quietly. "Deliberate harm to pack members for political gain. Conspiracy to sabotage a sacred trial." "I was protecting the kingdom." Morwenna's composure cracked. "We can't have a human Luna. She's weak. She's worthless. She'll destroy everything we've built." "She saved my life," Kaelor said. His voice cut like a blade. She dragged me through a blizzard when she could have left me to die. She gave me her only cloak, her only food, her only warmth. She risked everything for a stranger. He stepped forward. While you, Elder Morwenna, harmed 50 of your own pack to maintain your political power. He pulled the runestone from his cloak, the one they'd found after the magical blizzard. And this device that nearly killed us on the journey here. It bears Fellstone's crest, your crest, Morwenna. You've been trying to kill me for months, haven't you? Morwenna's face went white. Send a runner north, Kaelor said to Seren, to the Alliance Council. Tell them we require their presence for a trial of treason. You can't, Morwenna's voice pitched high. I'm head elder. I've served this kingdom for 90 years. And now you'll answer for your crimes. Kaelor's tone was absolute. Guards, confine Elder Morwenna and any council members who aided her to their chambers. They'll remain there until the Alliance arrives. 4 guards moved forward. Morwenna struggled, spitting curses as they escorted her from the hall. 3 other council members went with her, their faces ashen. The remaining 3 elders looked shaken but relieved. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, stepped forward. Your Majesty, we knew nothing of this plot. We would never. I know, Elder Cedric. Kaelor's voice softened slightly. You and Elders Thane and Marlowe have always been honest. You'll be questioned, but I don't believe you're complicit. He turned to the hall full of injured warriors. The trial is postponed. Luna Isolda will heal those in critical condition. The rest will receive proper medical care without any time constraints. His eyes found Isolda. Is that acceptable, my queen? Isolda's throat tightened. My queen, said with such conviction, such absolute certainty. It's acceptable, my king. The next 6 hours were a blur of blood and herbs and desperate healing. Isolda worked through 12 critical cases with fierce focus. Lysander's silver poisoning required her to extract the metal fragments piece by piece, then pack the wound with yarrow and mugwort. A warrior named Finn had a punctured lung that she sealed using techniques from her mother's grimoire and prayers to gods she wasn't sure existed. Kaelor stayed by her side the entire time, holding warriors down when the pain made them thrash, heating water, passing her instruments. His presence was steady, grounding. By late afternoon, all 12 critical patients were stable, pale and weak but breathing, alive. Isolda collapsed into a chair, her hands shaking with exhaustion. Kaelor knelt beside her. You did it. Barely. Her voice was hoarse. If we'd waited another hour, Finn would have died. Maybe 2 others. But we didn't wait, and they didn't die. He pressed a water skin into her hands. Drink. She drank. The water was cool and clean and tasted like salvation. The Alliance will be here in 3 days, Kaelor said quietly. Seren sent our fastest runner. They'll want to hear everything, see all the evidence. Will they punish her? Really punish her? If the evidence is as clear as I think, Kaelor's eyes were hard, they'll strip her of rank and exile her from all packed territories. Possibly worse. Isolda thought about Morwenna's pale eyes, the calculated cruelty behind them. She'll have allies, she said, people who agree with her, who don't want a human Luna. Probably, Kaelor's hand cupped her cheek, but they'll think twice about acting after they see what happens to traitors. 3 days passed in a strange limbo. Isolda continued healing the injured warriors, working without the pressure of time constraints. They began to trust her, to see that she genuinely cared about their recovery. Lysander especially became an ally. He visited her chambers each evening to report on his progress and share gossip from the barracks. The pack's talking, he said on the second night, about how you refused to play Morwenna's game. How you chose to save lives instead of proving a point. And what are they saying? Isolda asked. Lysander grinned. That maybe a human Luna isn't such a bad thing after all. On the morning of the 3rd day, the Alliance Council arrived. 3 elders from the great packs of the north. Ancient shifters with power that made the air shimmer around them. They swept into Fellstone Keep like a winter storm, all ice and absolute authority. The trial was held in the Great Hall. Every pack member who could fit crowded inside. Servants, warriors, nobles, commons, all witnesses to justice. The Alliance elders sat in judgment. Kaelor presented the evidence with the precision of a king who'd ruled for 3 centuries. First, Ravenna's testimony. The young servant stood before 300 witnesses and described in detail how she'd overheard Morwenna giving orders to Captain Draven, how the elder had specified exactly which warriors to injure and how she'd laughed about the human girl who would fail and be driven out in shame. Second, the written order in Morwenna's own hand. The Alliance elder passed it around, verified the handwriting with other documents from Morwenna's office. Third, the medical documentation. Isolda presented her mother's grimoire open to the pages describing silver poisoning from the Silver Wars. Then she showed diagrams she'd drawn of the warrior's wounds, identical patterns, identical placement. Impossible to occur naturally. Fourth, the runestone, the device that had created the magical blizzard. Kaelor had it examined by the Alliance's most skilled mage, who confirmed Morwenna's magical signature on the enchantment. Fifth, testimony from the warriors themselves. 12 young men stood and admitted they'd been ordered to injure themselves. Some had refused at first. Morwenna had threatened their families, their positions, their futures. I didn't want to do it, Lysander said, his voice breaking, but she said if I didn't, my sister would be cast out. She's only 14. She'd die in the winter. The crowd's murmur turned angry. Finally, Isolda herself testified. She spoke plainly without embellishment. Described finding Kaelor in the trap, the rescue, the journey, the magical attacks, the rigged trial. I'm not asking you to accept me because I'm human, she said. I'm asking you to see that I acted as a healer should. I saved lives. I chose mercy over pride, and I won't apologize for that. When all the evidence had been presented, one of the Alliance elders, a woman with silver hair and eyes like winter ice, stood to pronounce judgment. Elder Morwenna Ashcroft, she said, her voice carried to every corner of the hall. You are found guilty of treason against your king, conspiracy to commit murder, deliberate harm to pack members under your care, abuse of authority, and falsification of a sacred trial. Morwenna, who'd been silent throughout, finally spoke. I was protecting tradition, protecting our way of life from human contamination. You were protecting your own power, the Alliance elder said coldly, at the cost of innocent lives. The sentence is as follows. She raised her hand. Magic crackled in the air. Permanent exile from all shifter territories in North America. Stripping of all rank and title. Magical binding to prevent you from shifting or using pack magic. Restitution of 50,000 gold coins to Fellstone Keep for the harm you've caused, and a formal apology to Luna Isolda Greythorn witnessed by this assembly. Morwenna's face went white. You can't. We can. We have. The Alliance elder's eyes blazed. Speak the words traitor, or we add 20 lashes to your sentence. Morwenna's hands clenched into fists, but slowly, with visible hatred burning in every line of her body, she turned to Isolda. I apologize, she spat. Each word seemed to cost her. For my actions against you. I don't forgive you, Isolda said quietly, but I accept that justice has been served. The Alliance elder nodded. Guards, escort the traitor to the border. She has until sundown to leave our lands. If she's seen again, the sentence is death. As they dragged Morwenna away, she locked eyes with Isolda one last time. Hatred burned there, pure and undiluted, but also defeat. When she was gone, the Alliance elder turned to Isolda. Isolda Greythorn, you showed wisdom beyond your years in this trial. You prioritized life over politics, chose substance over show. You proved that Luna is not about blood or species. It's about character. She stood. The entire hall stood with her. Kneel, child. Isolda knelt. The elder placed a circlet of silver on her head. Simple but beautiful, set with a moonstone that caught the light. By the authority of the Alliance Council, and with the blessing of the moon herself, I recognize you as Luna Queen of Fellstone. May you rule with wisdom, strength, and the compassion you've already shown. The hall erupted in howls, wolves and humans alike celebrating. Kaelor pulled Isolda to her feet, into his arms, kissed her in front of everyone. My queen, he whispered against her lips. My Luna, my everything. The reforms came swiftly after that. Within a week, Kaelor and Isolda had drafted new laws. All council finances would be public, updated quarterly. Healers of any species were protected from persecution. Trials required evidence, not just accusations. And a new position was created, People's Advocate, elected by the pack to bring concerns directly to the throne. Lysander was the first to hold the position. The pack thrived under the changes. Trade increased, trust grew. And slowly, very slowly, the humans in the surrounding villages stopped seeing Fellstone as a threat. 6 months after the trial, spring came to the Shadowlands. Wildflowers bloomed in the courtyard where Isolda had built her healing academy. 27 students, shifters and humans, both learned the arts she taught from her mother's grimoire. Branimir came to visit on a warm afternoon in late spring. He'd been sober 4 months working as a carpenter in the Keep's workshops, learning to build instead of destroy. I'm sorry, sister, he said. Not the first time, maybe the 10th. But this time Isolda heard real understanding in his voice. I know, she said, and I forgive you. Father poisoned us both. Yes, but we're healing now. He smiled, tentative but real. We are. That evening, Isolda stood on the battlements watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Kaelor's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. Happy, he murmured against her hair. Deliriously. She leaned into him, though I still can't believe this is real sometimes. What part? That you're queen, that you have students, that you reformed an entire political system in 6 months. That I'm not alone anymore. His arms tightened. Never alone again, I promise. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into twilight. Marry me, Kaelor said suddenly. Isolda twisted in his arms. What? He dropped to one knee right there on the battlements, pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple silver band set with a moonstone that caught the dying light. Marry me, he said again. Not as king to subject, not as fated mates bound by destiny, as man to woman, as Kaelor to Isolda. Because I love you, because you make me better, because I want to spend every day of my very long life trying to deserve you. Tears pricked Isolda's eyes. That's quite a speech. I've had 300 years to practice. A crooked smile. Well, will you? On one condition. Anything. I keep my name. Isolda Greythorn, Queen of Fellstone, not just Queen Isolda. Done. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Anything else? Kiss me. He stood, pulled her into his arms, kissed her as the sun set and the first stars emerged, and the pack howled their joy from below. When they finally broke apart, both breathless Isolda rested her head against his chest. I love you too, she whispered, in case that wasn't clear. His laugh rumbled through her. It was clear, but I like hearing it anyway. They married 3 weeks later, a ceremony that blended shifter tradition with human custom. Isolda wore a dress of forest green, her silver circlet catching the light. Kaelor wore black leather and wolf fur, looking every inch the deadly king he was. But when he took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice shook. This ancient, powerful being trembled before her. I, Kaelor Blackfang, take you, Isolda Greythorn, as my wife, my queen, my partner in all things. I vow to stand beside you, not above you, to honor your choices, to protect your life but never cage your spirit, to love you until the stars fall and beyond. Isolda's own vows were simpler. I, Isolda Greythorn, take you, Kaelor Blackfang, as my husband, my king, my home. I vow to see you not the monster or the crown, but the man. To heal your wounds, to stand in your corner, to love you through every season, every storm, every century we're given. When Elder Cedric pronounced them, wed the pack howled. The sound shook the keep's foundations. Joy made audible. Years later, Isolda would stand in her healing academy teaching a young girl how to grind herbs. The girl would ask, can I be like you someday? And Isolda would smile, touch the silver circlet she still wore. Look across the courtyard where Kaelor stood speaking with ambassadors from 3 kingdoms, his eyes finding hers like they always did. You already are, she'd say. Every healer starts the same way, alone in the cold, choosing to save a life when it would be easier to walk away. The girl would tilt her head. You were alone. Once. Isolda's hand would drift to the scar on her palm where she'd cut it to feed Kaelor her blood all those years ago. But I learned something important. Sometimes the things we save end up saving us. What saved you? Isolda would look at her husband, her king, her partner in rebuilding a kingdom that now thrived on justice and compassion rather than fear. A wolf in a trap, she'd say, and the choice to help instead of run.